Yesterday evening at about 5 o'clock, I was starting to work on my sermon. So, yeah, it's 5 o'clock. And I was watching TV at the same time. I had actually been working on my sermon, at least percolating it all week. And I'd been thinking about what it means to be seen. And then this commercial came on the TV for a medicine, one of those, medicine commercials. It had Cyndi Lauper in it, who is looking much older than I remember her from the 80s. But she is an ad for Cosentyx, which is a psoriasis medicine. And apparently she's had psoriasis and she took this drug and it made everything better, right? But so that doesn't matter so much as the refrain she used multiple times in this ad is, "See me. See me," she said. Excuse me. I think that's what most of us want. We want to be seen. We don't want to be seen for the outward things, right? For how our hair looks or our clothes are or the car we drive or the house that we live in. We want to be seen for who we are on the inside, for our real thoughts, for our real fears and our real longings and our real love. We want to be seen and known and accepted. And I think on this All Saints Sunday, that's the thing that binds us together as humanity, right? We want to be seen and known. There's a saint I have been reading, a saint of the church, not an actual saint, but a man who is a saint by the virtue of his baptism. His name is Father Henry Nouwen. He was a very popular writer in the 90s when I was in seminary. And he is a Roman Catholic priest. He born in the Netherlands, moved here to teach after he became a priest at Yale Divinity School and then at Harvard Divinity School. He ended his career serving the L'Arche community in Toronto. L'Arche is a community that exists for developmentally disabled adults. It's an intentional Christian community, and he served as their pastor. Henry Nouwen wrote, he was a prolific writer, 30 or 40 books about the spiritual life. And he was always in his writing working out this concept of what it meant to be seen, to see other people and to be seen by God. And he very much wanted the people who read his books and the people he interacted with on a daily basis to understand that God saw them. So much that he even wrote a book intended for a completely secular audience. He had a friend who was a newspaper reporter in New York City who had been given the instruction to write an article about this Roman Catholic priest. Now, this friend was a secular Jew, agnostic, really didn't believe in anything, paired with one of the most spiritual people of the 20th century, Father Henry Nouwen. And Nouwen eventually wrote a book back to this friend after the friend had written newspaper articles about him. The book he wrote was called Life of the Beloved. He wanted his friend to understand what it meant to be a person of faith, what it meant to be loved by God in this world. And so when I was on my own sabbatical a couple of years ago, I read this book. It's called Life of the Beloved. It's very little. You can buy it on Amazon. And you should read it because it's a really fantastic explanation of what it means to be God's beloved. But here's the line that grabbed my heart and my attention during my sabbatical. Nouwen says, "We are the beloved. We are intimately loved long before our parents, teachers, spouses, children, and friends loved or wounded us. That's the truth of our lives. That's the truth I want you to claim for yourself. That's the truth spoken by the voice that says, 'You are my beloved.'" That's the same voice that Jesus heard, right? When he went to the Jordan River shortly after his 30th birthday, let's say, somewhere when he was a young man to the river Jordan and was baptized by John. Down into the river and then back up, and what comes is a dove above Jesus' head and a voice that says, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased. This is my beloved." That same thing happens to us in our baptisms, where God claims us as beloved, calls us his own, where he sees us. For Jesus, that baptism was the beginning of his ministry, and it ties together the whole arc of the Gospel of Luke. Everything for Jesus goes back to that moment where he was claimed by God in that baptism. And then sent out first to the wilderness to be tempted, and then back into his own region in Galilee where he taught and he preached and he healed and he did miracles. And he gathered followers. And he told people about this God who sees them, about this God who loves them and claims them. And so Jesus, the one who is seen by God and the one who sees people with God's eyes, is now looking toward Jerusalem in this reading we have for this morning. He has set his face, Luke says, over and over toward Jerusalem. Set his face toward his destiny of the trial and the crucifixion and the cross and the grave and the resurrection. Jesus is on a path. But that doesn't stop him from seeing people. Jericho is his last stop before entering Jerusalem. And in Jericho, there's a little man. His name is Zacchaeus. He's a wee little man, as the children's song goes. And he wants to see Jesus. He's heard about this healer, this teacher, this one who claims to be the Messiah. I'm not entirely sure Zacchaeus wants to be seen himself by Jesus, but he goes up in a tree. Sycamore trees have a lot of leaves. They're little leaves, and he climbs up in the tree, and he's watching this man come. It doesn't take very long for Jesus to see him. For Jesus to see him and call him by name and call him down out of that tree and tell him that he's going to his house. Well, tax collectors were not well-beloved people in their community. In fact, they were considered the chief of sinners, and Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. He was like the top sinner in the community, right? And now Jesus is calling him down and saying, I'm going to go to your house for dinner. Can you imagine how much that's riling up the critics? They're mad. Why isn't Jesus paying attention to them? Why is Jesus going to be with the sinners? Well, because Jesus said he came to save the lost. And when Zacchaeus is seen by Jesus, when he sees that love in Jesus' eye, his life is changed. He is turned around. He gives all of his money back, half of his money to the poor, and he promises anyone he's cheated, which has to have been a lot of people if he was the chief tax collector, he's going to pay him back 4 times the amount. Being seen by Jesus changed his life. Having his life changed meant he had to do different things. Jesus' love for us starts when Jesus sees us. For most of us in this room, the first time Jesus saw us was in the waters of baptism, where Jesus said, "You are my beloved," and called you by name. And when Jesus calls us beloved, when he sees us and gives us that name, then there is a call in our hearts and in our minds and our lives to see other people as Jesus sees them. Jesus calls us to see the ones who aren't seen, the lonely and the sick and the outcast and the immigrant and the poor and the addicted, and those who feel like God isn't real. Those are the people that Jesus is calling us to see. When we can see them as beloved through the eyes of Jesus, then we're called to do something. We're called to use the gifts that God has given us, to use our time, to use the talents that God has given us, to use the money and financial resources that God has given us to help make this world a kinder place, to help make this world a place where we see each person, whether we agree with them or not, as a beloved child of God. But it's my prayer for you today that you remember that Jesus sees you and calls you beloved, and that together you are called as the church to be sent out for the sake of the world. Amen.